Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. In this video, I'm going to talk about OOP or Object Oriented Programming and classes in Python. We're going to learn how to create classes and how to use classes in Python because basically everything in Python is class. Um, it maybe sounds strange, but yes, everything, especially variables and types, are classes in Python. So it's really necessary to understand what classes are and what object-oriented programming is. So you need to understand the basics and you need to understand how it works. So before jumping into the code, first I'm gonna explain what OOP is exactly and how we can define a class in Python. And after that, we will have an example to understand it in more depth. Okay, bear with me. Let's start. A very basic example that I always refer to is that consider the situation that you want to ask a couple of questions from 100 people. So basically, you have two ways. The first way is actually that you have no copy machine, and the only way is that you write down your questions over and over in 100 papers. So basically, you need to do a same thing. You need to write the same thing over and over in different papers and give those papers to 100 people. And they're going to answer exactly the same questions. But the other way, the second way you have is actually using a copy machine. So with the copy machine, you need to only create one questionnaire, one paper including all the questions you want, and then copy that paper as much as you want. So basically, you're copying the same questions. Well, there is the same concept in programming, especially in Python. Consider the situation that you're going to create an application. Usually, you need to keep the information of the user. So basically, instead of keeping the information of the user, for example, the username, the first name, the last name, and all the other stuff related to the user in separate variables, you can keep them together in a single variable, in a single structure, including all the feeds you want for that user. So probably you're thinking that it's something similar to dictionaries. Yes, it's pretty much similar to dictionaries and somehow to struct in other languages, but draw more about classes and object-oriented programming. It's just a simple part of it. So basically, you're creating a model of your object, and then you can create different instances from that class. So you can use it over and over in your program. There is no need to rewrite the same structure. You don't need to redefine the same structure over and over. You have a predefined structure, for example, for the user, and you can use that structure. It's like the questionnaire we talked about. The fields are already there, and the only thing you need to do is that fill those variables and fields. However, there are other things related to classes and object-oriented programming that we're going to talk about. The next thing that is really important is functions. The very first question we always get as a programmer, that what's the difference between a function and class? The main difference is that actually functions is a script that you can call that function, you can use it over and over in your program, but it doesn't keep any variable in it. You uh, give it an input and you expect to get an output from that, nothing more. You can't keep variables in a function because you don't have an access to the internal script of that function, and you can't touch it during the program. In contrast, classes can hold and keep our variables. The other important thing about classes is that besides the ability to keep the variables, we can actually define functions for classes. We can define functions inside classes. We call them methods. So basically, with classes, you have the ability of keeping variables as well as doing the exact thing like function. Actually, we call this encapsulation in object-oriented programming. Well, to make it clear, let's get back to the example we talked about earlier, which was about the user model. So consider a situation that you want to have a user model for your application. Basically, this user model has different fields such as username, password, first name, last name, email address, birth date, etc. All sorts of variables. These are the variables for our model, but what is method exactly? Here, a good example will be, for example, a function to calculate the age of the user based on the birth date. So to calculate the age, basically you say that current date minus a birth date. You can create this function and you can use that function in your program, but you have another option. You can create a method inside that model, and when you get an instance from that model for a specific user with a specific birth date, um, you can call that method for calculating the age of the user. But the difference here is that there is no need to pass the birth date of the user to the function because uh, it's already there, and the method can access the birth date because it's a part of that model. So there is no need to pass extra data into that method. And everything you want from that specific user is already there. So that's the most important difference between using a function and a method. But the important thing we have here is that we have everything together in a single place. We have all sorts of variables we want for that specific model, and also we have all the functions we need for that model. A very amazing thing here is that everything in Python is object. Basically, when you use a variable, for example, a string variable, it's basically an instance of the general string class. So that's how you can use different methods for that specific variable. For example, you can find a character in that string, or you can replace it, or you can use split for that string. So we talked about these methods in other videos, but the point here is that everything in Python is a class, and that's really amazing how it works in Python. Okay, if you enjoyed this, please hit subscribe and hit like, and thank you. Have a good time. Bye bye.